Welcome to the EmpowerHer Wellness podcast. I'm Morgan, and I'm thrilled to be your host and wellness coach as we navigate the path to a healthier, more confident you. As the owner of Get Fit With Me, I bring years of experience in personal training, nutrition, and coaching to each episode. Join me as we explore practical tips and strategies for fitness, nutrition, mindset, and more, all tailored for busy women just like you. Let's empower your wellness journey and achieve lasting transformation together. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to an episode of the EmpowerHer Wellness podcast. I'm your host and coach, Morgan Ekovich. And today I have an old friend with me today as a special guest. And I know I always say we have a special guest, but honestly, there's so much time and energy that goes into choosing the person who I want to have on this platform for you to learn from. And today's guest actually is super special. We used to be roommates back in college, and we just reconnected a couple months ago. And we have Dr. Kirsten Domagalski. She is a social psychologist and a jury consultant with a PhD in psychological science from UC Irvine. So much knowledge here when it comes to our brains, our emotions, and really how movement comes into play with all that. And that is why I've brought her on. Super excited to have you and to reconnect. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and to see you again and to just see you thriving in your business. It's inspiring. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, share a little bit about personal journey, professional, what made you move to the West Coast and kind of choose this line of work, and whether it's the social psychologist side or the jury consultant side, or maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah, so it's been a journey. And I always say just follow your excitement, which I know can be really scary, right? Or it feels impractical. Like people are like, oh, follow your excitement, but I need to pay my bills. I know that you can do a little bit of both. And that's actually what I'm doing right now. So when I was in college, in undergrad with you, I joined a social psychology lab researching why people would falsely confess to crimes they didn't commit. I joined it because I thought it was interesting. And of course, it's a problem if we are sending people to prison for things they didn't do. So it was just like, oh, this is something that interests me and passionate about. I'm going to volunteer my time to. Well, fast forward, I found out from that lab that I could get a PhD funded. And so many people don't know that the government does fund research. And I was just a first generation college student who never thought I could afford graduate school. So I was going a more practical teaching route. Not that teachers aren't great, they're wonderful and we need them, but it wasn't my main passion, right? And so I watched a TED Talk one day on social psychology. I emailed the woman who gave it. Her name's Elizabeth Loftus because she inspired me. And I said, are you taking students? I would love to work with you. And I know your research, you can fund research at your university. And I never thought she would respond because she was honestly like one of my heroes, and she did. And so that's kind of how I got into the social psychology world, was just one little step at a time, watching TED Talks, asking the right questions or asking any questions, right? Figuring out how to follow that. And so I got my PhD funded in 2018, and I just moved across the country in my little car alone, which is
That's
very
awesome.
scary.
It
Very
is.
scary,
I remember
but
your car too. Like that
oh,
is,
tiny,
I remember that. The fact that
tiny
you
little
did
Ford
that
Focus.
and you like just took the leap to ask, like, worst case, she was not going to respond. But like,
Right.
that's awesome. I did not know that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's like a huge lesson aside from psychology and all of that, is just ask the question. Or you can train yourself in rejection sensitivity, right? So just start asking silly questions you know people will say no to. This is like a psychology trick too. Like ask, the barista if you can have a hamburger, and they're going to look at you like, no, this is a coffee shop. But you get used to people saying no to you. And then when you ask for the things that you do want, you're not as afraid of the no. It's going to come. But sometimes yes will come too.
That's awesome. That I did not know that. We can dive into that. So, okay, you move across the country in your car, you
Yeah.
get your PhD funded, and then what?
Yeah, so I spent 5 years at UC Irvine, and I still was researching topics within the justice system, which I am very passionate about. I think we really want people to come out of the justice system reformed and a better place than where they got there, and that's just not the case right now. So I spent a lot of time thinking about how people became involved in our justice system and how we can shift our programming and the way we think about it in order to help people rather than harm them. And so one big piece of that and one of my favorite classes or courses that really stuck with me was just on emotion and how all emotions, not just happiness and joy and the ones we typically think of as good, right? All of them serve us. And the more that we can understand them, the more we can regulate, the more we can work with them. And so that became kind of like a side passion, right? I was doing this research and I was doing this work and kind of applying these concepts. But then personally, I'm always listening to podcasts on this and following people to learn more about it. And so now I've started to write about it a little bit with my Substack. It's called Emotions Are Allies. So I have more work there and really just I've led a few women's retreats, right? And now I'm just in this place where I love talking about, and that's why I'm so excited to be here today. I love talking about how different emotions serve us.
I love that. And I love that you took what you were going to turn into a career at some point, however that was going to look, and turn it into some sort of side thing that was fun for you. Because I do feel like sometimes we don't always love our career right away. And we're like, how can we take the thing that I love and turn it into something that I do? And not to say you don't love your full time job, but it's also good to have a passion project that like lights your heart on fire that makes a 9 to 5 worth it. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
you mentioned women's retreat. So are women specifically who you work with the emotions with and you write about in your Substack, or do you kind of focus on everybody?
I focus on everyone, but I do love working with women. And so I think women's retreats are a really special container to do so. It's just a little bit, I don't want to stereotype, but it's just a little bit softer and a little bit more open, right? I think we as women are socialized to be that way, but it also gives us some specific topics within emotion that are really important that might be different from if I like hosted a men's retreat around the emotions we're not supposed to express as women. So things like anger and resentment, right, are a little less socially acceptable for us to express and even to feel. Like we're kind of taught, don't be angry from a young age, even subconsciously, right? Even just from our parents being annoyed or upset that we're angry. And so, yeah, women's retreats give me a really fun space to dive into that and kind of work with women on those things and learn about them in new ways.
So you mentioned anger and resentment. Let's kind of dive into this. So for those of you who have listened to previous episodes, you've heard Kelly Meyerson talk about her Substack. Substack, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a place where people can write articles and blog posts and essentially become a published author in the digital world. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's other like little things you can upload videos, you can have community conversations, podcasting, things like that as well.
Okay, super cool. So I haven't jumped in there. I've like read other people's, but I haven't jumped in from like an ownership perspective. So I haven't seen all the fun things. But so let's kind of dive into that. Emotions are allies. That's something that you've created. And you mentioned the anger and the resentment. Like, what types of emotions as women do we tend to suppress? And how do we notice that we're suppressing them? Because I think that's a thing is like, yeah, I feel this way, but we may not always communicate it. Like, what does that suppression looks like?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think everyone functions differently, but one way to know that you might not be expressing yourself or that you might have like this built up emotion is if you have this like boiling over effect, right? So, like, say you're having a day and a lot is going on, and you might be feeling a lot of emotions, say with your partner, children, and like, when your robe gets caught on the door and you're just like,
Yep.
oh, like if you have that moment and you really feel like you're just going to lose it, it might be a sign that, oh, hey, I'm not really paying attention to my body and the things that I need and the emotions that I'm feeling. So, like, that's one indicator is like that emotional boil over or like a bigger reaction to something small than you might normally have. That's one way. Can you
I
relate to
to-
that? You're shaking your head.
oh yes. There's like it's not so much the like getting caught, but every once in a while you just like somebody tells you either a kind thing or a mean thing, and I just like will break down and start crying. I'm like, yep, probably haven't been paying attention to things for a while. Like just a waterfall. And you're just
Yeah.
like they said you look nice. I'm like, I don't care. This is apparently
Right.
what is happening
Something
right
needs
now.
to be released, right? And I am
Yeah.
part of the frequent criers club,
Yep.
absolutely. And I encourage people like crying does not necessarily just mean you're sad. If you are angry and you don't feel comfortable releasing emotion in a different way, you can cry. Like go have that moment with yourself. Or if you're happy, like let yourself cry and show that to people because it's beautiful, and it allows people to see like, oh, I can also express myself in a healthy way too. I mean, tears are a healthy expression. There's of course unhealthy expressions of emotions, and I like to talk about that, right? So we talk about suppressing emotion. I think women sometimes feel like we need to suppress anger because reactions to anger, if we're not careful, can be harmful, like lashing out in a way,
Mm,
or I mean, violence is less common in women, but of course it can happen. But emotional violence, for example,
mhm.
like reacting and calling someone something we don't want to, or saying something we don't mean. So I'm not encouraging emotional reactivity. I'm encouraging us to notice, okay, I'm angry. What is this signaling to me? So one of my favorite professors in college was Dr. Linda Levine, and she does a lot on emotion work. And I remember sitting in her course and she said, emotions are just signposts. Like they're not good, they're not bad. And one thing about anger is telling us what we value. It's saying, okay, there's something in the way of a goal that we have. And so when we start feeling angry, we can ask ourselves, okay, like what goal is being thwarted right now? What is in our way? And it could be something as simple as like, I'm hungry and I don't want to be goals to eat, right? And I get angry when I'm hangry. I have to be like aware of
Same.
that. But it could also be a bigger goal we didn't realize we had, right? Like if our boss doesn't give us a promotion, we're angry because we care about getting to that next step or we want more. And so when we start playing with what we want, we realize like with our emotions and how they tell us what we want, then we can reframe them and work with them differently, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess I'm putting it in like a practical sense of too. When you're at the house and you ask your child or you ask your partner to do something because there's people coming over. So the goal is to have the house looking nice for the people coming over, and the action doesn't get done. Anger and resentment typically are built because you end up
Mhm.
doing the thing. Does that also correlate like on a smaller end?
Oh, absolutely. And I like what you
Okay.
say. So the goal, I want to dive into that with you, right? So the goal is for your house to be clean, right? Why do you want the house to be clean when people come over? You
Because,
personally, right? Everyone might be
yeah.
different.
So typically I want the house to be clean because I don't want people to think we live in a pigsty. And we don't, but every once in a while, like dishes will pile up for a day or two. Like it's natural human being.
Yeah.
So when people come over, I want them to see real life, but I also want them to know like they are coming into a clean environment that they feel comfortable in.
Yeah, and you know what that signals to me, even one step farther, is that you care about the social connection. You want the people that you love to feel comfortable in your home. You care about how they think of you, which is very normal. There's, we want the people we love to think positively of us because we want to keep those connections. And so it points to something really fundamental in us that, like, most emotions come from the drive to stay connected and to stay loved. And so I think too, being able to reframe that for your husband or your children, like, hey, I really care about these people, right? And I have a goal of them feeling safe in our home. Can you help me with that? Versus like, God, your socks are all over and you're so lazy. Like, I don't want to look like a slob. That can actually bridge connections too a little bit more. And sometimes even de-escalate our anger when we're just listening to it, right? But you have to listen first. Like it's okay to be angry that your kids or your husband aren't helping with this. It's okay to have that goal, but then just working with it and thinking about what's really important to you and communicating what's important sometimes rather than just the emotion itself can also help us connect with ourselves and with the people that we're sharing with.
So, what are some ways that we can start to notice and start to identify, okay, I'm angry. This is the goal. Like, is it just like pausing and actually having these conversations? Is it writing it down? Like, what types of techniques? Because we all learn differently. Like, what types of things should
Absolutely.
we be doing for that first step so that we can be successful instead of just stuck in the same hamster wheel?
Yeah, I think the more connected, especially, well, I would say for all, not just women, but especially for women, the more connected we can just be with our bodies in a general sense, the more we're going to be able to notice when we have an emotion. So I think people are sick of hearing this, but meditation practices are so good because when you meditate, you are just observing your thoughts, right? And observing your feelings. And so when you get comfortable doing that, that's something that is going to become more natural. We're going to create those neural pathways throughout the day to say, oh, like man, my shoulders are really tense, or, my heart is racing. Maybe I'm feeling more nervous about this than I realized. Maybe I care about this more than I thought, or I'm not as prepared as I want to be. People who don't like meditation, though, I always recommend walking. Any like consistent, easy movement is going to kind of sync up our body. It's going to get us into our body instead and out of our mind a little bit. And don't get me wrong, I go on these walks and I'm in nature and I'm like, oh, it's going to be peaceful. And I still have like a million thoughts going. But as long as we can kind of observe them and work with them, it helps us to get back into our bodies. So, another thing too you can do when you're new to it is just set timers throughout the day and ask yourself, how am I feeling? What do I need? Emotions sometimes come up because we're not taking care of our body. So if you're hungry all the time, you're probably kind of angry all the time, you
I am.
know? Yeah, right? It gives you a little bit of like edge when you're hungry. When you're tired, you might be a little bit less motivated and it might move towards sadness. So it might sound silly to some, but just set like check-in timers for yourself.
Mm.
Check in and just close your eyes and ask like how you're feeling, what has come up today that maybe you want to address with someone else. Give yourself some time between reacting and responding. Those kind of things are helpful.
Should we track things so we can start to see a pattern? So like if something in general, like if we notice, you just used the sack example earlier. So like should we track anytime something like happens that creates that anger or resentment so we can start to see a pattern? Is that important or is it not really and that can actually get us hyper focused somewhere else?
A good question. I don't know the literature on that specifically, but I would say if you're feeling like emotionally out of control, right? And you're like, man, I just like I'm really angry all the time, or I'm really sad all the time, or something is feeling imbalanced, the first thing I would recommend is like nature and grounding, being with yourself and quiet. So like that just really does get us back into this place with ourselves. But yeah, if it's a consistent issue and you're trying to investigate it, it can be really helpful to like journal about it or to just take note of the things that are really getting you hyped up. And instead of reacting in that moment, like you were saying, it can be good to say, like, take note of these things that are making you feel this way. And maybe you can start asking yourself, okay, like, why is this thing important to me? Why is it upsetting me? And you can be like an investigator to your own self. That makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense because I have clients do it when it comes to their nutrition. Like I make
Mm,
them food log before we even
mhm.
give suggestions. Like it's hard to see what happens. We work with a hormone doctor here and she's like, "I need you to track before you come to me because if not, we just have to go back and forth." So there is tracking that's beneficial when it comes to our health. But I also know when we're working with the mind, the mind is honestly one of the most challenging pieces. And when I started Get Fit with Me in the online, that's the one piece that was missing when I was an in-person trainer is I could physically help people with their body. I can help them
Mhm.
nutritionally. But when I only see you once a week for a half hour and they don't have the accountability, it's hard to help them with their mindset. And that's the thing people don't raise their hand and say, "Hey, help me. Help me with my mindset."
Yeah. And that's a huge, like, important shift, right? Is
Yeah.
getting into the right place there. And so I will say too, I want to point out, I'm telling everyone to listen to their emotions. So, like, if we have an emotion that we are uncomfortable with because we've been taught, it's not safe to feel or whatever it might be, or that it's bad, I am encouraging you to listen. There's really good work by Dick Schwartz. It's parts work, which is like this idea that emotionally we have all of these selves, right, speaking. And I think we can relate to this. Like one self might want this and one self might want that. And then we have our higher self that is like the ultimate rational, just like grounded decision maker. And he encourages us in this work to listen to all of these selves. But listening is different than believing them, right? Or like
Mm.
letting them run the show. And so I like to apply this to emotion work. So, like, we have all of these emotions, and we absolutely, when they come in, stomping, if it's anger or crying because it's sadness, like, I literally think of myself wrapping them in this little blanket. Like,
Mm.
okay, you can stay. Like, you're safe here, be warm. Because for a long time, they didn't have a safe place. And think about how you feel when someone tells you to get out
Mm.
versus like when someone tells you to get out or like to stop talking, you almost want to get louder or you just feel really rejected. And we don't want to do that to ourselves, right? Like, so I think we've been trained to tell anger or sadness, like, get out, go away. No, like, let it stay, let it tell you what it wants to tell you. If you're dysregulated, the narrative might not be completely correct. You might say, anger might say, my husband really doesn't love me because he left his socks out. And you can just listen. Like you can just listen to that and say, okay, anger, I hear you. Like that's really frustrating. And that what that does is that it separates you from your emotion. You are not your emotion. You're just having
Mm.
this emotion to signal something. It's trying to signal something. So when you can try to figure out what it's signaling, you get to, as your higher self, take in all of the information and then make a more wise decision. But just try to make space for it, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And then so by putting I love that blanket analogy. I don't know how many people have a weighted blanket. I love my weighted blanket. It is
Yeah,
like
yeah.
when I've been overstimulated, whether it's networking or just lots of peopling, that's my new term. We've peopled too
Peopling.
much this
Yes.
weekend. We need to stop people for a little bit. Like the weighted blanket is just that comfort feeling, and that's that protection. So do anger, resentment, sadness, like do all of these emotions. And I love how you used it in quotations. And I know those of you listening couldn't see that, but this is on YouTube. So you can always go back. But like, we never talk about like good or bad. There's just like, it's just what it is.
Mhm.
So, like, are those protecting us in some way when we actually let them in? Like, when we let
Yeah.
in those bad emotions and quotations?
And yeah, absolutely. Like they are all functional, right? So when we're dysregulated and they create reactions, that's when they can be harmful. But when we're just listening to them, right?
Mhm.
And that they're here to serve a function. It's our bodies are literally there's something going on in our bodies that our brain is interpreting, and our bodies are very wise, right? They tell us what we need a lot of the time. And so, yeah, all of these emotions are here. And resentment is like a really interesting one because I would consider it a complex emotion. It's kind of a mix of anger and sadness and sometimes regret and all of these things. But certainly women don't want to be seen as resentful, and people don't typically want to feel resentful. But I've actually made really good friends with resentment lately, and this is why.
Mm.
Because when resentment comes in and I notice, like, oh man, I don't want to give to that friend anymore. Like, she's just taken, or whatever it is, or I don't want to go to that family event. I'm tired. I don't feel like my cup is filled right now. What it's pointing to is that, hey, you've overextended yourself. Like, it's here in my little counsel to say, you've done too much. You haven't taken care of yourself in the ways you've needed. You've maybe made commitments to someone else, thinking that there was some contract that they owed you that back. But guess what? That wasn't part of the conversation. So that's actually on you, kid. Like, it's okay. You don't need
Mhm.
to beat yourself up. But it's my friend that kind of comes in and holds me accountable if I'm paying attention for taking care of myself. And I think that's really beautiful. So when it's around, like I really try to sit with it, talk to it about and learn what I need.
And that's an interesting perspective because you're right. And I haven't seen Inside Out, but I'm envisioning your emotions like the little players in Inside Out. I've heard it's a fantastic movie and something
It's
we should
so
all
good.
see. But when
Yeah.
you're talking about these friends and these characters, that's what I'm envisioning like you have created in your mind to help you really relate and embrace them because
Yes.
I think those are things that like we don't do. And I think sometimes we put on the smile or we put on the happiness, we put on the joy, and it's fake. I think we've all done
Hmm.
that, especially as women at some point. Okay, we got to be the cheerleader because it's this situation. And deep down, you really are angry, frustrated, don't want to
Hmm.
talk to a human. But like sometimes we just got to do what we got to do. But I feel
Yeah.
like your little counsel that you like you're
Yeah.
talking about, I'm like, that's the visual representation I got from that.
Exactly. And I'm like, Inside Out is gonna take away my whole like job because they're doing such a good job, these movies of like educating children now on befriending emotions, on like you are not your emotions. And so I think women, especially of our age and older, and the older generation, I talk with my mom about this all the time. I have a ton of compassion for her because they were just really taught to self-abandon to be safe. Like,
Mhm.
everyone else's needs are more important. You being happy and smiley is going to keep you safe, and no one wants an angry woman, right? I mean, that's still a narrative today. And so I'm not ever inferring that we should be nasty to someone. but I am inferring that it's okay to express anger in a healthy way and tell people when a boundary has been crossed or choose yourself. You don't always have to show up and smile so everyone else is okay. And in fact, when you do that for too long, the people who suffer most, of course, are yourself, which should come first. But if you really want to be selfless, you need to be okay for yourself to like be okay with the people you love most in your home or the people you interact with most because it'll add up. Eventually, if you're really not taking care of yourself, you are going to lash out at those people. So you really got to think about if it's worth it and who giving that energy to is worth.
I thought this just aligns really well. I'm reading Girls Stop Apologizing by Rachel
Mm-hmm.
Hollis.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've read it, but it's taken me I've never been a huge reader. So like
No judgment. I listen
it's,
to books.
it's
It's
taken me
more helpful.
forever to get through. So I've been reading 10 minutes a day and I was just read the chapter where she's like, I don't volunteer at my kid's school. And like parents are like, why isn't she volunteering? All these things. She's like, I learned a while back that if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. Like if I don't
Mhm.
have the energy and the excitement to do something, then it's a no. And it's okay that it's a no. And that's where like
Mhm.
those boundaries come in that you were mentioning, I think is maybe hell yes doesn't fit in your vocabulary or how you feel about something, but like that analogy to me is like getting good at saying no, just like in the beginning when you said get good at asking. Like the worst they're going to say is no. Like they're really good skills that I don't think we're taught that as we get older, it's harder to do. It's harder to change our
Mhm.
nutrition. It's harder to change our exercise. It's harder to change our mindset the older we get and the more of these patterns we've created that now we have to create new patterns for.
Yeah, and protecting your yes is so important. As women, I think everyone I know and am inspired by, right, who do a lot. They're like, I'm so busy, or I have a lot on my plate, right? And it's like you need to protect your yes because every no you say gives you time for this other yes that you actually want
Mhm.
to do. And one thing I'll point out in this journey, especially if you're at the beginning of starting to listen to your emotions and express yourself with resentment and things like that, or saying no to more, for example, not doing things at your kid's school. People who don't have boundaries around their time and who do feel obligated by society to do things they don't want to do, who haven't really sat with themselves and said, okay, I'm okay with not looking like the good guy in this situation. I need to protect myself. They get pretty upset with you when you start putting boundaries around your time or expressing emotions that they're not comfortable with. Right? Because they're not comfortable yet. They haven't considered that they too can protect their time. They too don't have to overextend themselves. And so it's like anger comes up in them because they feel like you're not contributing in the same way I am, right? Or whatever it might be. And, that's okay. That's their journey.
Mhm.
And it can be really hard to sit with, but that's okay.
Yeah, and you're right because it is. And through the last couple of years, we all grow personally. It all looks different, but we all grow personally. One of the ways is saying no to more things and being protective of that yes. And in the beginning, some people don't like it because they're like, "Well, you've
Hmm.
always said yes. You've always taken on when we've asked." I'm like, "I'm not taking it on anymore." And it's
Yeah.
okay. It is okay to say no, and it's okay for them to be uncomfortable with me. It's
Hmm.
okay for them not to be happy with me for a while because that's even a hard feeling to sit with. If it's a family
Yeah.
member or a good friend or your partner, if you're setting a
Yeah.
boundary, that's good for you.
And you talk about practices, right? Where you're like trying to like food tracking or whatever it might be. One good practice when you get into, I don't want to say get into disappointing people, but you get comfortable with protecting yourself, right? And setting boundaries because people are going to be disappointed. We always say, we're adults, like in my psychology group, we're adults. We can handle emotions. You don't have to handle other people's disappointment or sadness. That's for them. And so, one thing that you can implement when you're trying to stop people pleasing, and it's going to feel scary when people have these emotions, is just to create little containers for yourself, right? Like, okay, I know that I'm probably going to create disappointment for my mom, or because I can't go to this family event, or I'm choosing not to because I don't have the bandwidth, and that's not going to feel good. Just create a little bit of space for yourself to like go for a walk on the beach afterwards, or to just sit with it and realize, okay, I'm still physically safe. Everyone's okay. I'm not bad. Like, and just give yourself that space and your nervous system time to like regulate again. And don't just keep on the hamster wheel. You've got to learn, you've got to teach yourself that you're safe when you do those things.
I love that. And movement in nature, as well as our emotions, is something else you are passionate about. So, and you've mentioned going outside, being in nature, going for a walk on the beach. You've mentioned forms of movement as ways to kind of help regulate that nervous system.
Mhm.
I'm a huge advocate of any sort of movement every day, even if it's just 10 minutes. It does not have to be something high intensity. It can be a walk, it can be stretching. What types of movement have you found in your line of work to be the most beneficial for our nervous system and to help with our emotions and connecting with ourselves?
Yeah, I would say like all exercise and movement is good for us psychologically in different ways. So I don't want to like, if you're doing something that's working for you that you feel like is helping you regulate, stick to it. But of course, things like HIIT, like high intensity interval training and things like that, those are going to be a little bit more inflammatory, or if we're already in a like dysregulated state, aren't as helpful. So really just anything consistent and slow where you're not feeling like I'm battling myself to hit a PR or something is
Mm.
good. So walking, swimming, biking, yoga, of course, is great. And then like dancing, I have a practice where if I really can't work out, but I'm just like, and I've had a long day, I just like pick a favorite song and I dance in my kitchen like a fool for a little bit, you know?
I love it. I
Yeah.
just, I think the listening to music that we listened to in college and high school has definitely made it circle back around. And to me, those are the fun songs to dance to. And I think if you can even do it outside, even better because
Yeah.
of that nature portion, reconnecting with the earth and with yourself. Have you experienced a shift in your own emotional state after any particular kind of movement or being in nature? Like what is something that like resonated with you at one point that like I'm always coming back to this. I had some sort of feeling or it's like no, this just works every single time for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really drawn to bodies of water. So, like, when I'm extremely dysregulated, I know not everyone has the privilege of doing that, but usually, I mean, in Michigan too, if a lot of your clients are there, there's like a creek or a river or something. I don't know what it is. It might just be a me thing, but just going and sitting, if I'm really, really feeling overwhelmed or like I don't have the answers or like I'm out of control, I'm putting in
Hmm.
quotes, because I think
Yep.
women are taught to be controlled all the time and to not have big emotions,
Hmm.
Um, sitting, going and walking or sitting near water is just very healing for me. Now, if you can't do that, it's very simple, but I'll go back to it. Like if I am feeling too much, walking with myself is the main thing. Truly, it's just a very simple, easy thing. It's something I can go back to. I don't need equipment. Wherever I am, I can do it. And so I'll just make myself walk for at least 10 to 20 minutes. I don't want to. I never want to when I'm in that state. I want to lay on the couch and like drown in my miseries or whatever it might be. But I would really highly recommend that if you're starting off and you're like, hey, I really want to befriend my emotions. I want to talk to my little council of people, my anger, my sadness, whatever, just put in a 10-minute walk and start listening to them.
I love it. And it's those mental health walks is kind of what I call them. It's like, this is the thing I
Mhm.
don't want to do. I'm actually kind of angry about it in the beginning.
Yes.
But once I like get down my street into the stop sign and I make my way to the neighborhood, I'm like, okay, I know I feel better. I knew this
Yeah.
going in, but there is a period where like it's not what you want to do. The other thing I feel like women run into is we don't have time. They don't have time for that
Hmm.
10 minutes. So, how have you worked with people to kind of allow them to see that they need to make time for it because
Yeah.
none of us have time. We are all busy in our own way. So,
I think,
yeah.
yeah, I think great question. And there's a few different ways to look at it. 10 minutes, hopefully everyone can find 10 minutes. But this is the way I see it. If you don't make time for those things, it's going to be stolen in other ways. It's going to be stolen because you have a meltdown and you can't think straight at work, and something takes you a lot longer than it should because you're ruminating about something that's happening at home that you haven't taken time to process. Or it's going to come out in other ways in mistakes because you are just preoccupied. And so really it's a small investment for a really big return in other areas of your life that are important to you. So that's kind of how I try to pitch it. I do understand though, I sometimes days get away from me and I'm like, I did not make time for this. And how do I feel? Right. So at the end of the day, check in with yourself and say, how do I feel when I don't make time for these things? I find when I'm moving in other ways too and prioritizing my health in other ways that I necessarily always need the emotion walk, right? But when those other things fall to the wayside and I don't have time for my training and I didn't get to my women's meeting, whatever it is, that's when these small actions are really important.
And then, kind of staying on that, I've got one more question here before we kind of move into some last minute things. Is you mentioned going without technology or being with yourself in nature. And I think that's hard
Mhm.
for us to do for a few
100%.
different reasons. One, we are addicted. I don't care who you say, like we are all addicted to a device in some sense. I can probably say I'm addicted to my AirPods. I have them in my ears probably way too often, listening to a podcast,
Same.
listening to a book, listening to a show, music. It's just like the company.
Yeah.
I really enjoy the company that comes with there. So like and then I think there's a safety aspect. Depending on who you are in the neighborhood you live in, like you're never going to leave your phone at home because there is a safety
Mhm.
aspect. So
Absolutely.
whether it's all of those or one of those reasonings, how do we create a boundary with technology when we're out on these walks where we need to tune into ourselves? Like what are ways that we can create a boundary with that?
Yeah, I definitely don't say like you can't bring your phone or you can't bring your AirPods because one thing that can be helpful too is just putting on like calming music, something in the background. Also, part of these walks, music does breed emotion. It helps us kind of
Mm,
feel things. So if you're feeling like, oh, I don't know how I'm feeling, but I need to like release, you can just like choose songs that are evoking different things for you, right? Like high
mm,
energy, low energy, sadness. Sometimes I listen to like breakup songs, my relationship is totally fine, but like I just allow myself to get into that and feel something. So you can bring technology as a means of helping you
mm,
connect and process, and of course, just as safety. But if you do really just want to talk to your little counselor or whatever it is, I would recommend putting on just like background music without any lyrics or anything like that. Or just making a commitment to yourself. You can set a timer and put your phone in your bag. I'm going to walk for 10 or 15 minutes and I'm not going to check my phone until this timer comes off. And I'm going to put it on do not disturb mode. And then after those 15 minutes, if you're at the beach or wherever you walk to or whatever, path you're on and you really want to sit and scroll, like give it to yourself. It's fine. We're human, but that can be
I like
helpful.
that. Yeah, because you're right. Music is very helpful. And sometimes it is nice having things. And it's also nice not having things. Awesome. I love those examples.
Yeah. And I do want to call out too, if you're neurodivergent, a lot of people have like ADHD, or a lot of people, women now are being diagnosed with autism later in life.
Mm,
We're learning just so much more about what that means. It could be sensory issues, it could be things like that. Everyone's going to have different things that work for them. And so, like, I'm not at all shaming you if background music kind of keeps your mind calm so you can hear one thought at a time. I know that's true for a lot of neurodivergent women, then do that. Don't feel like, oh, I'm broken because I can't sit in silence and get through this. Do what you need to do to be able to process.
awesome. And for people listening who've never heard neurodivergent or who don't know what that is, what is just like the definition of that? I've seen it more, but like I feel like people say they are, but they never explain what it is. And I know there's people
Yeah.
listening who are like, I don't even know what that term means.
So, like a neurotypical person, it's just talking about neurotypes, so brain types. I'm even hesitant as a psychologist to completely define it because it's always shifting. But here's what I'll put it simply. So, when you are neurotypical, it is the quote unquote typical brain that we are used to that functions pretty well for the way society is set up, right? You can focus at your 9 to 5 most of the time. You don't necessarily get sensory overload like some individuals might just out in public and in quote unquote, and I put quotes around this, but like normal circumstances, normal social
Mm,
circumstances, day-to-day things don't overwhelm you in the same way that they might for neurodivergent people, which means they just diverge from this. And so neurodivergence comes in a lot of forms, but the biggest ones right now are ADHD that are being talked about, are like ADHD, maybe OCD or autism are some examples. And so it is all a spectrum too. Like a lot of women don't realize I'm very sensitive to like sensory things, to sound specifically. And my
mm.
whole life, I didn't really pay attention because I was taught like, You just got to be okay in loud places. You just got to, And I realize, oh, I feel very overwhelmed very quickly when I have too much noise or whatever it might be. So I wouldn't even necessarily say everyone is either neurotypical or neurodivergent. There just might be little things that you differ in that you should pay attention to and accommodate yourself in because you deserve that to be regulated, really, is what it comes down to.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, because I think that's definitely, you just start to see more terms being thrown out there,
Hmm.
especially as people scroll on social media and nobody ever like describes them. And I always want people to be able to come here to figure out, to get information and to feel like they have somebody to reach out to that is an expert that can actually help
Oh,
them. So, as we kind of wrap up here, before I have you kind of share how people can get in contact with you if they want to learn more or they want your Substack, what would be, we talked about a ton today. We talked about
mhm.
a lot. So, like, what would be one or two pieces of advice that you would give somebody walking away? Because we're all about taking action. So, leaving today, what is that one piece of thing that if you forget everything else, I want you to do this and it's going to
Yeah.
make an impact?
Yeah, I think we've said it before, but this is the big thing. There's just no such thing as a bad emotion. All of them are trying to help you. You don't have to let emotions rule you, but you should listen to all of them. Try to make space for all of them and make friends with all of them. And the 10 minutes a day to yourself in some way to sit with yourself, whether it's journaling, meditating, going for that walk, it really can be transformative. And I know you asked for one thing, but the other thing is, especially for women, like that I want to highlight from this conversation, it's okay to disappoint people,
Mm-hmm.
to love yourself, and to take care of yourself. So the people who are worth keeping around aren't going to be upset by your boundaries. They're going to be like, wow, look at you taking care of yourself, right? So it can be hard to like lose friends and lose connections in those ways when that first starts to happen, but it's a blessing
Yeah,
over time.
and I'm going to piggyback on that. Just like you're all doing a great job. You are doing a great
Hmm.
job, even if setting those boundaries makes you feel like you're not. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing is we forget how good of jobs we are doing. Like, it's not easy to keep ourselves alive some days when there's so much going
No.
on. Like, you've kept
Yeah.
yourself afloat, and that
Yeah.
may be all you have to do that day.
Yeah, be kind to yourself. That's another thing too. Like Martha Beck has some amazing work on all of this if you're looking for like more experts, just like emotional health and things of that nature. And she calls it KIST, KIST, and it's just kind internal self-talk. Like just be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up for your mistakes. I know people think like, oh, if I'm nice to myself, I'll do it again. No, you won't. You know how you felt when you made the mistake, right? Or maybe you will, but beating yourself up is not the reason why you're gonna not do it again. So just keep that in mind.
So, I would love for you to share ways that people can connect with you. Anything you share, we'll make sure we put in the show notes, as well as any of those doctors or authors or books that you mentioned throughout. You mentioned some really great resources. We'll make sure to have those links and we'll put those in the show notes below so people can go and do more research if they want, or they can just go and check it out. So, how can people follow you, work with you, subscribe to your Substack, all those things?
Yeah. So I'm really working on building up that Substack community. It is free where you can come and, read, comment. Every week I'm going to be releasing or writing a new article on different emotions and how they function. And so I might do a deep dive on anger or resentment or sadness or some mix. So that's Dr. Drgalski on Substack. And then the other two places to find me are on Instagram and TikTok. I'm going to try to start making little snippets. So if you're like, I don't have time to read an article, but I want to scroll, that's at Dr. Galski for both Instagram and TikTok. And hopefully I'll be doing some programming and things soon. So if you follow me there, it'll all be just linked. And I'll link my articles as well. I would love to see you all. And then you wanted recommendations for books and things.
Just the ones you mentioned above. I'll make sure to get those links from you so that we can have them in
Okay.
the show notes. I know you just mentioned some amazing other people that you've learned from and that you see as mentors, that some people may be like, oh, I want to dive into that as well.
Yeah, if you're looking for women who are just truly free and their full selves that talk about these things and not self-abandoning, they don't go into emotions as much as I do, but they're really great. Elizabeth Gilbert is one of them. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love, but she has done more since then on other topics. She writes a Substack called Letters from Love. And so you literally write to love and you ask love what it wants you to know today. And it's like this very like self-love practice. So she's wonderful and she has good community. And then Martha Beck, as I mentioned, is the other one. So
Awesome. We'll make sure to link both of those in the comments. And any last minute words before we kind of wrap up here?
I don't think so, other than I'm just like so proud to see you build this business and so happy that we could have this conversation together today. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining and reaching out and asking. This really all started with an ask. Like, if we really
Yeah.
circle back to how we started this episode. So, I'm super proud of you and to see everything that you're doing. And I'm glad we were able to connect and have you on as a guest. And if down the road, when you do have retreats or programs that you're going to be hosting online that you want, or even locally, whatever that is, reach
Mhm.
back out. We'd love to have you on again because this is a topic that it's our mindset. It's something we don't raise our hand asking for help with. And it's something that we can't just listen once and try once and say, oh, I'm good. Like, this is a continuing process always. So, would love to have you
Yeah.
back on in the future.
Thank you for saying that. And that's a great thing to end on. I have to wake up every day and remind myself these things. So even as an expert, it's a daily practice. Yeah.
Awesome. So, for all of you who are still listening, remember if this episode resonated with you or there's somebody else in your life who you really think would benefit from hearing this, open up your phone, click that share button, send a message, post it on social media. This podcast is free. YouTube, it's free. So, like, the best way to thank me and to thank our guests is to share this with people in your life who would benefit. So, I will see you all next Thursday. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you for tuning in to the Empower Her Wellness podcast. I hope you found today's episode inspiring and packed with actionable tips. Remember, your journey to becoming the strongest, most confident version of yourself is just beginning. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode and join our community of empowered women. Until next time, stay strong and stay confident.